Yesterday morning, a Jeju Air passenger plane attempting to land at Muan Airport in Jeollanam-do collided with a runway barrier. The explosion caused by the crash resulted in the deaths of 179 out of the 181 people on board. This tragedy has become the deadliest aviation accident in South Korea's history.
어제 오전 전남 무안공항에 착륙 시도를 하던 제주항공 여객기가 활주로 담장과 충돌했습니다. 이 사고로 여객기가 폭발하면서 탑승객 181명 가운데 179명이 숨졌습니다. 이번 참사는 국내에서 발생한 항공기 사고 중 가장 많은 인명피해를 낸 사고로 남게 됐습니다. Okay, so I'm sure that people have been glued to the news.
Yes.
And watching photos as well as videos. Very disturbing. Tell us, just give us basically the rough facts for now.
Well, there were 180 people on board, and unfortunately, there were only 2 survivors, and they were both flight crew members. So the remaining 175 passengers of that number, 173 of them were Korean. 2 of them were from Thailand, where the plane actually took off from. Yes, but for those people that have deceased, and as a comfort to the families, a memorial altar is planned to be set up for them.
네, 구조된 생존자는 승무원 2명.
Yes.
그다음에 173명은 한국인, 2명은 태국인.
Yes.
So this was a flight from Bangkok.
Yes, it
which
was-
explains why there were 2 Thai.
The 2 Thai
Yeah,
passengers
yes.
as well. And of course, there were an extra, other than the 175 passengers, there were 6 crew members that were also Korean.
Okay. So what could be some factors, or what are some factors? How did this happen?
Well, they're still investigating, but it does seem that a bird strike,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes.
There were some birds that disrupted the plane while it was trying to land, messed with its landing gear.
Yeah.
And the pilots actually had figured that there was a problem with their landing gear. They gave out a distress signal, 전환시호 보내는데요. So they actually pulled up and tried to land again. So if
Right.
any of the footage that you've seen on the news, that's actually them trying after another attempt to land.
Right.
And this whole accident, from the time that the control tower gave permission to land until the accident occurred, happened in only about 9 minutes, they're saying.
Wow. So it happened in a very short period of
A
time.
very short period of time, but they're still investigating. They're looking at black box information
Right.
To see, put all the pieces together.
Right. So we kind of would like to know why the landing gear wasn't working. Was it because of the bird strike? And it's interesting because I hear that this area is known as a resting place for migratory birds, that birds fly and they take a rest.
Yes.
So there are a lot of birds in this area.
Right, there are a lot of migratory birds, right? 철새, right? So they're moving around, and obviously they don't like to be in big cities, right?
Sure.
And we as humans, we often like to put our airports away from big cities because of things like noise pollution, right?
Sure.
So it's both the birds and people who are trying to build airports. They're looking at similar places and they're crossing paths, and this is a problem. But this is not just a problem for the Muan Airport. Other airports in Incheon, Gimpo,
Right.
Gimhae, they also have these habitats for these birds
Sure they
in
do.
their surrounding areas.
They have those tidal flats.
Right. So with all of that in mind, there's now an investigation into what can be done to not have this happen again.
So I did hear that this aircraft, for some reason, could not dump the fuel.
Right.
This is kind of an issue as well.
Yes. So the main body, what we'd call the fuselage,
Yes.
봉체 in Korean, that's actually what they landed on. They didn't have the landing gear, the wheels at
That's
the
right,
bottom.
right.
So they just kind of
They skidded.
plopped
Right.
onto, they skidded, slid on the runway there. And because of the friction and everything going on, colliding with the barrier, it all burned up in the end.
Right.
But this particular model of plane couldn't do what's called fuel dumping.
Fuel dumping.
Yeah, so in Korean you also say fuel dumping. 그러니까 연료 방출 기능 없대요. So they weren't able to get that all out before they made this emergency landing.
So obviously when you have that much fuel,
Yeah.
right, and then you crash, the fire is going to get much bigger.
Exactly. That main body of the plane was pretty much completely burned up in this accident.
Right.
Yeah.
It is such a tragedy. Okay. Okay. And a lot of people are reporting yesterday I was looking at the New York Times and various media outlets, and it was on the front page. And
Yes, Reuters, the Associated Press. It was all on the front page. They had very big headlines. This was big news all over the world. Many world leaders sent their condolences,
Sure.
including U.S. President Biden, saying it was a tragedy for Korea, and their thoughts and prayers were with the victims
Yeah.
and the families that are left behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's look at this word aviation.
Yes.
This was an aviation accident,
Yes.
as it's reported in the news. And anytime you hear the word aviation, you think of what?
So aviation, the word, I often think of the act of flying airplanes.
Yeah.
So anything to do with an airplane, you often hear this word aviation, 항공, 아니면
Yeah.
항공의.
Yes.
Right? So you can also use it as an adjective. You could talk about aviation science.
Aviation
so
science.
Studying how to fly planes, right?
You can also, definitely, there are aviation regulations.
Yes. And if you are studying to become a pilot, you might go to aviation school.
Okay, very good. So anytime you see the word aviation, it has to do with flying an airplane.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to. Okay, let me read that again first before we move on to our second news. Yesterday morning, a Jeju Air passenger plane attempting to land at Muan Airport in Jeollanam-do collided with a runway barrier. The explosion caused by the crash resulted in the deaths of 179 out of the 181 people on board. This tragedy has become the deadliest aviation accident in South Korea's history.